Good evening, America. This is Ron Burgundy. Oh, sorry. Couldn't remember what video this was. Block 2. This is Mr. Smrcina's lecture on DNA. So if Mrs. Huss did not tell you, please get out your packets. Make sure we're focused. Delaney, please put your phone away. Jordan, please turn around and pay attention. This is going to be short and sweet, but this is going to get you guys set up for what you need to be doing today in class. That will prepare us perfectly for the next few days. So in your DNA packets, we're going to be knocking out a few of these things today. We're going to start looking at the structure of DNA. We're going to start looking at nucleotides, the particles that make up DNA. And then what you'll do towards the end of class is start looking at complementary base pairing and how DNA is a double helix held together. And then we'll start looking at the enzymes and the process of DNA replication and how we all go from one cell zygotes to human beings and we're making copies of that. So I believe the page I'd like you guys to start on is page 3. Everybody flip. I'm kind of going to color code as I go here, but before we really dig in, let's all make sure, and Mrs. Huss, I think I put in the notes, tell Kim or McKenna by your desk right there, they can pause it if I get going too fast. But everybody, we need to make sure right off the bat we understand DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, okay? And that right there, I mean, I'm going to bold these letters, but there's our D, there's N, and there's A, okay? Now, we'll dig into what some of these mean, but ribo has to do with ribose, which is a sugar. Deoxy means we have an oxygen missing. And then obviously nucleic acids are a class of hydrocarbons that we've talked about a little bit. Nucleic meaning we're in the nucleus, and acid having to do with a hydrogen particle. So not doing these all at once here, just some kind of random thoughts I had. You guys need to understand that when we talk about DNA, we're talking about the genetic information in each organism. Okay, now I didn't put person right there because plants have their own DNA. Whales have their own DNA. Fish have their own DNA. Augie and Bodie, the corgis, have their own DNA. And it really is what generates the variations and the differences in us, okay? So you guys will hear a lot about how I always usually spend a minute talking about, someone always brings up chimpanzees and humans and our DNA. And that's a different talk for a different day. But at the end of a scientific investigation, we can see that there is a great deal of similarities in the way that humans and chimpanzees develop appendages and fingers, and most of that comes from their genetic information and the proteins that are being coded for in our body, okay? Some other notes I jotted down were DNA, obviously, Mrs. Huss, feel free to pause it if the kids need it, but obviously DNA is a huge part of us making new cells. It is a huge part of mitosis. It's a huge part of us reproducing and passing on our traits. And really, that goes into us living, us growing, us maturing, and all of those things. Okay, feel free to pause as needed. It also, I mean, I think we all know this, but the nucleus we've always called the control center, but what really this is, DNA is the blueprint for life. It is what tells us I need more of these cells, I need more nerve cells, I need more liver cells, I need more. And really, it's what guides everything we do in the world. Even when we're talking about respiration and photosynthesis, all of that is directed. All of those cellular processes take place from DNA. Last two here. I just mentioned this, but we'll learn very shortly, and I'm actually going to read both of these. But I've made you guys write this several times, but this central dogma of genetics is what this chapter is all about, okay? DNA is how we're going to eventually translate. I've used different languages here, but we'll take DNA and make RNA, and eventually what that will code for is amino acids. And hopefully by now we're really starting to understand every single process that happens in our bodies is because of proteins and different ones that are carrying out those processes. So pause it if we need to, but that's just kind of some lead-in background information. I'm now going to scroll down to, I believe this is page 4. I don't know if that other one was right. I did lead into this picture a little bit the other day, so I'm going to unbold a few things here, but as we start to look at the structure of DNA class, my favorite class, Delaney, put your phone away. We can see here that there's this little idea of this double helix, and we talked a little bit yesterday about these bonds in between, and we'll dive into those more, but if you look here, you can see that this isn't just a strand. I mean, this picture is great because it shows us a cell. It shows us the nucleus of the cell. we know that when that chromatin condenses to chromatid to form chromosomes, what that really is little segments of genes that's made up of DNA. And if you guys look close enough on this picture, you can tell that there's G's and T's and C's and A's. And this is where life starts to happen. This is why Mr. Smrcina is a Division I caliber football player body with bushy eyebrows and brown hair. But my brother Zach is super skinny, not a Division I football player, and his hair is kind of orangish. It all lies in these little letters right here. So when we look at what this is made up of, all nucleic acids, keep in mind, deoxyribonucleic acid, and then our other one is ribonucleic acid. The building blocks of those organic compounds are called nucleotides, and that's what we filled in the other day. So each one of these little blocks around here is a nucleotide building those little pieces together on one strand. Then we have the hydrogen bond connecting it to another strand, and that's really where it all starts. Now you guys are going to go into lab and build one of these, and we're going to start simple, and then we'll move it up to an honors level. But when we look at these nucleotides, these building blocks, if you will, feel free to pause if we need to catch up or rewind. This picture is very, very simple, and we'll take it more. But nucleotides, these little building blocks, are always going to be composed in our class of three things. I've always taught a little mnemonic device I'll show you on the next page. But the first thing is a sugar, okay? You guys remember from our first chapter, we have glucose and fructose and galactose and sucrose. All sugars end in ose, okay? And when we look at that, the sugar that's going to be in DNA is deoxyribose. And that's where we get D in DNA, is the fact that it's deoxy. These are called pentose sugars. The sugar in RNA is a little bit different, but later today, some of you guys will already start thinking, well, what does pentose mean? This picture right here shows how it's a pentose sugar. Remember, carbon is the backbone of life. It's the most important element. So all of these little corners are little carbons, and you can already kind of guess why it's a pentose sugar. The second part of a DNA nucleotide is a phosphate group, okay? So this is oftentimes abbreviated with a little circle because it's a covalently bonded molecule. Chemistry kids, you'll remember, it's 4 oxygens covalently bonded to 1 phosphorus, and the fact that it's charged is really, really important. That's how we're going to get those little strands coming together. Last but not least, and this is what you need to get into today, I showed you this at the top there, but the other thing is this idea of this nitrogenous base. Now, that's a scary word. Nitrogenous just means nitrogen is the key element there, okay? So this is where if I scroll back up, oh, I need to get my charger. I'm going to pause the video. Hold on. Oh. All right, I got battery. Had my quick nightly cigarette. That's what one of my freshman girls at track practice, she said with my voice being so raspy, she asked me if I was starting to smoke cigarettes. Those freshmen, I swear. Coming back up here though, guys, these 3 parts and these nitrogenous bases, you can see here, these little letters A and T and C and G fit together very, very particularly. And this is what makes us different than me, different than you, flowers different than ferns, whales different than walruses. It's these little nitrogen bases. So if you scroll down there, the 4 nitrogen bases in DNA, we should probably add that together, okay? These 4 are only in DNA. It's a little bit different for RNA. But those 4 will always use the letters A and T and G and C. And how these are pronounced is A is adenine. Some people will say adenine, but I always say adenine. The T will stand for thymine. G stands for guanine, and C stands for cytosine, okay? You guys will work with these today, and actually right now is a little break. Why don't you guys all stand up? Mrs. Huss, I'd like you to pause the video, and why don't you guys all take a little loop? You can maybe get a drink, but stop at the island, the big table in the middle of my room, and see if you guys can go connect the dots on the little model I left and the cutouts I left on the desk and the color scheme I used. So let's pause the video, take a break, go look at that quick. And then after 2 minutes, come back and we'll keep moving. So we didn't have the perfect colors, but you guys can see that's Mrs. McMahon's little DNA molecule I've used. I tried to color code stuff so that the blue matches the blue, the red matches the red, and then I didn't have perfect colors. But you guys can see It's going to be very, very simple, but we're going to make it honors level. You guys are going to build your own DNA strands today using the things we've talked about. So you guys did see the deoxyribose, that little sugar. It was 5-sided. You saw a phosphate group, and you'll learn why. It's a P in the middle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's PO4. And then you'll also have these nitrogen bases, and you're going to see how they kind of work together here. So my little mnemonic device, just so we've kind of hit it, I'm going to blow it up a little bit here, but I've always taught kids that DNA, we see a lot of DNA on ESPN. I just saw the Baylor guys throttle the Gonzaga guys the other day. Some of those dudes had pretty good DNA, but what a DNA nucleotide entails is, and the word entails, guys, means it's composed of, it's made of a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base. And then you guys can see the little ESPN right there. I don't want to dig too much into this, but these are the chemical structures of what these things look like. All these little vertexes right here are carbons. And really, guys, when we start to look at DNA, because I'm on my last 4 minutes here, but the nitrogen bases, I'm on my next page if you haven't flipped yet, but those nitrogen bases are the key to how DNA truly has the structure it has. So I love at the bottom here, we kind of have 3 little pictures. So you guys are going to build one kind of like this today. Now, if you zoom in on the first one, you can see that there's G and C and A and T, and you'll notice some of them are rounded and some of them are pointy. That's a huge part of your activity today, and we'll learn more about that because it's really not rounded, guys. It's all about the bond, and this side's positive and this side's charged, and how are they going to come together? The middle picture I like a lot because it starts to show us that you'll notice between A and T, there's 2 hydrogen bonds, and between G and C, there's 3 hydrogen bonds. I also really like this one because you can see in this little molecule right here, I have 1 phosphorus and then 1, 2, 3, 4 oxygens. That's those little phosphates. You'll also notice it's 5' and 3'. In math, that's how we say that apostrophe. DNA will always be opposite. So 5' and 3' this way, and then it's 3' to 5' that way. And it's kind of this yin and yang thing that holds the DNA together. This is what we call an electron dot structure model of it, but this just goes to show you guys our DNA truly isn't little Legos getting snapped together. It's a bunch of atoms working together to covalently and hydrogen bond together to make and hold together our DNA. Now, finishing up our things here, because this is what you need to do today. So I'm on my next page here, but you guys can already kind of start to see between these pictures and Mrs. McMahon's model, the DNA, what we end up calling it is a double helix. And the word helix has to do with the twisting nature of things, and it's double because there's 2 strands, and a lot of kids don't necessarily like that. So I've always used the idea of something being a spiral staircase. You guys have seen that in those big old houses. Now moving into today here, complementary base pairing is what you guys are going to be looking at, okay? So I'll put this in red, and you probably need to pause it. But complementary on the color wheel, we know that red is opposite of green, and that has to do with what they need and what they do together as colors. And a lot of times kids call those opposite colors because then they come together to make black or white. And that's really how these pairs are going to come together here. So you guys have already probably started to kind of catch up on a lot of the stuff, but at this point in time, I need you to partner up. And then the lab is kind of a mess right now, and I want you to be careful about going and grabbing too much stuff. But what you're going to do is you're going to partner up and you're going to make up your own DNA strand, okay? Now, we can't just go use thousands. I didn't print out 100 of those things, but your rules are you're going to first build one side of the DNA strand, and it needs to be random. Now, maybe Bailey's is ATCCGA. Maybe Bethany's is TGC. It really, I want it to be random, okay? And what you'll end up doing is making one side of it, and you're going to have to build your deoxyriboses. And notice, guys, it all comes together. There's a star where there goes a star. The phosphate goes where there's a phosphate. And then what you'll do is you'll build the other side, and you're going to make a double-stranded DNA molecule. Okay? You have to have at least 6 nucleotides, and you can use glue sticks. You should use the scissors, and you need to keep it all together. But you're going to build that, and then you're going to come ask Mrs. Huss for 2 worksheets. One is going to be about reinforcing all the practice we just did with nucleotides. The other one is going to be an honors level activity where you guys are going to take everything a step further. What we'll end up doing the rest of today is learning how DNA replicates and copies itself. You're going to need your Chromebooks. You're going to need to be creative. I expect that we're very, very productive, making honors level efforts at starting to understand the intricacies of how DNA is duplicated.